Welcome everyone. You've tuned into Moving Forward, Building Resilience, an FASD webinar series designed to build capacity, knowledge, and resilience in FASD, as well as engage participants like yourselves in an interactive dialogue. My name is Meagan and I will be your moderator for this event. We appreciate that you've joined us today and I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy at home. We have over 300 attendees from across Canada today, and we are excited to have you. This webinar series is hosted by Surrey Place, a service organization in Toronto, Canada. We help children and adults living with developmental disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, visual impairments, and FASD reach their full potential through our clinical services, groups, and workshops, as well as extensive services to community agencies. Just a little bit of housekeeping for today. At the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer period. If you have a question, we ask that you type it into the Q&A section at the top of your screen on the right. It's indicated by a question mark. Questions will be read by a moderator after the presenters talk. Please indicate which presenters you'd like to ask a question to. And also, the session is being recorded and will be available on our website probably in about 24 hours. And don't forget to join the conversation on social media using the hashtag FASD Resilience. We also want to acknowledge our partners for making this event possible. A big thank you to Hospital for Sick Kids Foundation and Scarborough Health Network and Unity Health Toronto. Today is our third and final day of our webinars, and we are discussing parenting a child with FASD. I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Scrow, who will be moderating our panel discussion this morning. He is the Chief of Pediatrics and Medical Director of the FASD Clinic at St. Mike's Hospital, Unity Health Toronto. He will begin by moderating our first speaker.
Thank you, Meagan, and thank you for all attending and the parents who have joined today. I'm going to first introduce the individuals and then we'll be having a question and answer period with each of them. Janice is a parent of a 8-year-old with FASD who she adopted at 1 year of age. Prior to getting the diagnosis for her son, Janice saw him struggling but didn't know how to help him. Now, with some clarity on the nature of his challenges, she is better able to prepare and advocate and seek support for her son. Jessica is the parent of a 13-year-old girl with FASD. She also presents with other diagnoses, including intellectual disability, attachment disorder. Her daughter was adopted when she was 3 years old, along with 2 brothers after they had been removed from their home. Jessica is an active advocate for families and parents of adopted children. Currently working in Regional Parent Liaison in Toronto with Adopt for Life. A nonprofit organization provides post-adoption support services for families across Ontario. Bill and her partner Debbie live in Sioux Lookout, Ontario, and have been caring for individuals with FASD for over 20 years. In their professional lives, Bill works with adults with developmental disabilities at community living, and Debbie has worked as a child welfare and is currently pursuing a PhD in educational sustainability. Kate is the adoptive parent of a child impacted with FASD and has fostered many other children impacted as well. Kate is very active in supporting permanency planning for youth who have been in foster care. Through her experiences, she has firsthand knowledge with children and youth with FASD and their unique strengths to navigate life, experience education, and handle relationships. Kate is a strong advocate for school supports, teaching, self-regulation, and planning for the future. We're going to begin the discussion with Janice. Janice, tell us a little bit about your son and why you decided to move forward with an FASD diagnosis.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you for having me. And my son has been with me since he was about 10 months old. And he was always a very bubbly little baby, very bright, very articulate and funny. And as he grew, his language was very good. He enjoyed reading, doing sports, soccer. He enjoys music and art. And he goes to school at a French immersion school. So very bright, very smart, but he had difficulties and challenges with some very simple things. So he couldn't follow instructions. He had a hard time sticking to tasks. He was easily frustrated over very little things. He developed anxiety and he stopped talking, became very withdrawn. And he just had challenges with organizing things, keeping things together. He was always losing things at school. The lunch kit wouldn't come home, shoes wouldn't come home. So I couldn't understand, if he was so bright, why was he having all of these little issues? And he could speak fluent French, but if you stopped him and said, "What's the word for good morning in French?" it completely threw him off. He was flustered, totally overwhelmed, and couldn't answer a basic word that everybody who doesn't even speak French would know. And he's very literal. You got to watch every word that you say to him, or it comes back at you because this is what you said. You know, he has trouble understanding simple concepts like time and money. So he doesn't understand that he has to meet the school bus at 7:30 means he has to get out of the house before 7:30 to get to the school bus. He keeps saying, but it's not 7:30 yet. So he missed the bus this morning, and he doesn't understand money. You know, he'll run out to the ice cream truck and he'll get something for $5. He comes back with $3 change, and then he'll want another $5 to go back out to buy something else because he doesn't understand that he could have bought it with the change. So just all these little things just didn't make sense. So I thought, well, okay, let's see if there's something going on here.
Janice, those sound like sometimes challenging and frustrating problems. How did having the diagnosis of FASD help you better understand your child?
Well, for me, I had knowledge of FASD before, but I didn't connect him with it at the time. But it was a principal at his school who said to me one day, he has a son who is mirroring Ezra, or Ezra is mirroring his son, and maybe I should get this checked out. So I started exploring. I started doing a lot of research, started trying to put things together, and that's when it started to make sense to me that this is a possibility, especially since I knew that birth mom had been drinking during pregnancy. And so I started to kind of make that transition mentally. I kind of knew, I was like, okay, yeah, this looks like what is going on here. But it's very difficult because everything is so silent. So you look at him and he looks like a normal kid, and it's hard to remember that he may be having a hard time with something, or that he's having a challenge rather than just refusing to do it. And so in a day-to-day, it's still a challenge to see how we can support him. And there are mixed feelings for me, of course, because even though it validates that, yeah, there is actually something happening here, and it's important now that I have the information, I know how to deal with it. But at the same time, it's really sad to know that he's going to have this diagnosis for the rest of his life, and he's going to have struggles for a long time to come.
Beyond the understanding, has the diagnosis had impact on your supports in your son's education and schooling?
Well, last year, in the last school year, I did give the information to his teacher to try to help to explain some of the reasons behind some of the challenges he was having. And the teacher didn't know much about FASD, excuse me. But And it didn't help much at the time. This year he's in a new school, and I did share copies of his assessment report with the school. I put together a little information package about FASD and about him, some of his strengths, and some of the things that he did have challenges with. And of course, the school year has just started, so we haven't had the chance to get the full support that we may get. And of course, with COVID-19, everything is different. But we're beginning to look at things to see how he can be supported in school. They are open to it. And we do have a resource worker who is trying to help us with some of those challenges in areas of school. So hopefully it will work out fairly well for him.
Thank you. How's the diagnosis impacted your family?
Well, I think it's really how it's changed me, because a lot of times I don't really know how to help him. He might have a meltdown, and I try to hold him or something. He doesn't want to be held. It's hard for it to know what to do in a moment, but at least it makes me stop and think something is going on, and so I can back off a little bit. I can think about my reaction, and I can get less frustrated because I know he needs some help with something, and rather than getting upset and trying to keep on at him, I just know, this is not working. Let's find a different way.
Excellent. In this series, our theme is resiliency. However, raising a child with FASD has its challenges, as you've talked about. Can you share with us how you've dealt with and overcome some of these obstacles?
Well, it's hard to understand all the needs. He's not yet able to communicate everything to us, and he's just beginning to explain, even yesterday, about some of the needs he has in school. He's not listening to the teacher because he knows he's distracted with the magnet that's in his desk. And it's the first time that he's ever really articulated that, yeah, I know that I'm distracted and I haven't been listening, but I wasn't really interested in what she was saying. So we still have challenges with meeting some of his needs, and he often gets labeled as lazy or naughty, because it's hard for him to cope with some of the demands on him. He doesn't know what to do. And he's prone to getting bullied by his peers because he's such a slow processor and he takes so long to do everything that they get frustrated and they move on because they want to go play their game now and he's taking too long. So, I really do have to advocate on his behalf, try to communicate his challenges to others in a way that they can understand so that he can do some of the tasks that are expected of him.
Excellent. Do you feel that since he's had the diagnosis that some of those labels of being lazy or naughty will improve or have improved?
I haven't had the chance to see that yet. As I said, the school year has just started. He's only just gone out maybe a week now, and because of COVID, we're not having that much interaction in the schools. So we're emailing the teachers. I was able to email them yesterday to tell them some of the challenges that he expressed to me yesterday, but it's not been easy to go into the classroom, to talk to them, to see the kids, to find out what's happening. And of course, they're supposed to be social distancing at recess anyway, so it's not so easy now with COVID.
Do you feel helpless at times?
Very often. I'm part of a group who's had experiences with FASD and a lot of children that they've raised who have had FASD. So I get a lot of support from them. I learn a lot of things from them, things like keeping his work area clean, limiting the amount of things that he has access to, because he will get so distracted and get so confused and so overwhelmed. So with less things to stimulate him, it's easier. Well, he still can't be organized, but at least there's less to distract him and less to be disorganized around him. I try to label everything for him and give him checklists, but it's still very hard for him. And I feel like I give him a checklist to remember all the things to bring home from school. He still comes home without them. So it's still frustrating. He still missed the school bus this morning. and what can I do, you know? So you always have to try and be a step ahead of him, try to be planning things. I know that he'll have a meeting with this counselor and I'll say, she's going to ask you this. Why don't you think about what you're going to say? Because I know it's going to take him so long to answer. And he'll say, well, what's the point of planning it when I'm going to give them a different answer by the time they ask me anyway? So it's hard to help him to even plan or be prepared for anything. It's completely overwhelming for him. And so, yeah, sometimes it is overwhelming for me as well.
Thank you. What types of support do you think will help in setting your son up for success in the future?
Well, he needs support quite often with starting tasks. If you give him a multi-step instruction, he doesn't get it. So you have to get him started. You may even have to walk him through it for him to be able to do it, both at home and in school. And he needs, I mean, he daily needs just a step-by-step, do this, do that, every single day. Don't give him the water bottle to put in his school bag and think it's going to get into the school bag, because when we're ready to go through the door, I'll see it on the console table by the door because he didn't put it in the bag. So you have to not just give the instruction, you have to follow through with it to make sure it happened. Respite support, I think, is really important for both of us, for myself and for him. I mean, I'm a single parent, and it's so overwhelming, as I said, sometimes to be here on a constant every single day, doing the same thing every single day, especially during COVID, where you're locked away and there's almost no relief. So respite is very important as well. It helps you to reset and be able to come back with a little bit more patience.
Yes, I think that, you know, support for the child and support for the parent is intertwined very much so. What's one piece of practical advice you would give someone who has a child, who's raising a child with FASD?
Well, I'd say you just have to be patient. You don't know the things that are hurting your child or what that he's internalized or that are affecting him in the moment. So you just have to be patient to be able to ride things out. But most importantly, in terms of practical advice, just don't let them near electronics, because once they get hooked on that, the struggle is real. So
Thank you for that. What are common misconceptions that people have about individuals with FASD, and how can we as a community deal with these misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
well, one of the things that if you do have any member of the public who has heard of FASD, one of the first things they say is, but he doesn't have any facial features. So people think you have to look a certain way to have FASD. But generally speaking, it's not very recognized by the public or by the schools. So it's hard to get support in school because they don't know what FASD is and they think he's a bright kid. He doesn't need the support. Because it's such a silent disability, it's hard for people to understand that there is an issue. There just isn't enough awareness, and people will keep prompting him and saying, just do this, just do that. They don't understand that he can't do it. And if he was in a wheelchair, they wouldn't say to him, just walk over here. But because they can't see what's wrong with him, they just think, well, you can do this, why don't you just do it? And the more they push him, the more overwhelmed he gets, and the less likely it's going to happen. But it's hard for people to make that change and that chain and that link to see what FASD is for people.
Can you share with us any resources that you find helpful for yourself?
Well, for me, I've read a lot of books. I go to YouTube frequently, and I watch podcasts, listen to podcasts on anything that's happening with FASD in the moment, just to see what's the latest, how are other people coping. And there's a Facebook group that I'm a part of that has been very helpful to me, a private group on Facebook. And there's just so many people from all over the world who have had different experiences, people with children who are now in their 40s with FASD or siblings, people who were never diagnosed, people who have just been recently diagnosed, people with little babies. So there's a wealth of different experiences and everyone gets to share some of the things that have been helpful to them. So that's been very helpful to me. Yeah.
Thank you, Janice, and I'd really like to thank you for sharing this with the community. We're next going to talk to Jessica. Jessica, would you like to tell us a little bit about you and your family? Jessica?
Sorry, I unmuted. Yes, thanks for having me. So my husband and I are adoptive parents of 3 children. Our daughter came to us when she was 3, along with her 7-month-old brother. And then a few years down the road, we adopted another brother. And that was back in November of 2009. So we went from 0 kids to 2 kids. And at that time, we had very little birth history regarding our children. We knew that our daughter was behind. That's how it was described to us. And over the years, it became clear that she had various special needs. So she's now has been diagnosed with an intellectual disability. She has anxiety. She has a mood disorder. She has vision and hearing problems, and most recently was diagnosed with FASD. She was diagnosed with FASD in the spring of 2019 when her developmental pediatrician mentioned that he had been following her for many years and mentioned that I should pursue the diagnosis of FASD because some of the behaviors she had been showing over the years just weren't improving despite interventions that we had been trying. Because we had no confirmation of prenatal alcohol exposure, I did have to advocate pretty hard to get an assessment done for her, but I was very fortunate to connect with Surrey Place, and they were able to give her an informal diagnosis of FASD, but it was enough to get her the supports needed, which was great. So
why did you elect to move forward with the diagnosis?
Just some of the behaviors we've been seeing over the years. She just really struggles. She doesn't have any impulse control. She does also have ADHD. She just doesn't show remorse when she makes bad choices. The behaviors she demonstrates that are considered negative are just so repetitive. And nothing had really been working. And that's when I spoke with the developmental pediatrician and said, listen, you know, therapy isn't working, meds aren't working. I feel like we're missing a piece of the puzzle here. We need to learn more about what's going on with her. So that's when we pursued the diagnosis.
And having this diagnosis, how did it help you better understand your daughter's needs?
It just, as Janice was saying, kind of, you know, makes us respond to the behaviors in a different way. It really makes us understand that she just doesn't have the control. She cannot manage her own feelings and emotions, and that we need to be more patient and be more understanding of the fact that, you know, she's not doing this to drive us crazy. She's doing this because she can't help herself. So it's just every time she gets a new diagnosis, and we've been very fortunate with our resources over the years, we just learn more. She's a very complex child, and the more we know, the more we can help her.
Excellent. What supports have been helpful in your daughter's needs at school and with her learning?
Well, our daughter attends a full-time special education class. She's been in this program since grade 1. It's an MID program, and that's been really great. It's a small class with lots of staff. So that's been really wonderful. We're very fortunate that she's in this program.
How has the diagnosis of FASD impacted your family?
Just more understanding. And, you know, Chantal has paved the road for her brothers who also have some special needs, not to the same level, but it kind of makes us understand that maybe that's something we need to consider for them as well moving forward. And it's just, we just work as a team to sort of, she can get on her brother's nerves, they can get on her nerves too, but we kind of have to, explain to them that this is part of who she is, not so that they don't get so frustrated as well.
Our theme in this series is resiliency. Can you share with us how you've dealt with some obstacles and how you've been able to overcome them?
For sure. And speaking of resiliency, I have to say our daughter is the most resilient one because she has a lot going on. But for us, it's always been about pursuing diagnosis, pursuing assessment, often getting rejected because she just didn't fit in at the right age or the right time in her life to get a certain support. So just staying on top of it, advocating constantly. My motto is I don't take no for an answer. So if one of my kids needs something, they're going to get it. And so I've learned to be a tough cookie over the years, and it's really helped her along the way.
You mentioned that you feel she's very resilient. Can you give an example of that?
I just, the whole COVID thing, she's gone back to school and she's just handling it so well, so beautifully. I didn't expect it. I do the same thing as Janice. I lay everything out. Everything is super clear. We go through everything every day. We get ready super early for those last minute, forgot my water bottle business. Like we get ready like 20 minutes before the bus is going to come. But she's just like, I expected the masks to be an issue. I expected the hand sanitizer. I've been so worried, and she's just like rocking it out. And it's really cool to see how she's handled herself in this strange universe where she has to get on a bus with a mask and it's all different. And I expected her to be very upset about the changes in her classroom with the desks and everything, and she's just surprised me with how beautifully she's handling it.
That's a wonderful example of resiliency. This has been a tough time. What type of supports has your daughter received after she's had the diagnosis of FASD?
Well, very fortunately with Surrey Place, she is now getting weekly therapy, and that's been wonderful. And then most recently, we're now working with a behavior therapist with Surrey Place. And we're just in the early days of that, but she's going to offer supports for us at home, but is also willing to go into the classroom and see if she can help the teacher with Chantal's behaviors as well. In the past, I know I said she's doing really well, but she has had a lot of struggles with her peers, which is often the case with kids who have a lack of impulse control. So I kind of expect that to happen soon. And, the teacher will say that the same thing kind of happens every day. So we're looking forward to this behavior therapy and the option of educating the teacher as well as us. So we're really excited about this getting started.
Excellent. Based on your experience, would you encourage parents to seek a diagnosis of FASD when this is raised as a concern?
For sure, absolutely, because it opens the door for more support. At the beginning of our parenting journey, there was the concern about labels. Oh, you're getting this diagnosis and you're labeling your kid with all these letters and numbers, and they're not a person. But that's not how it's been for us. For us, every diagnosis has led to support. So I feel like it's very important to get the diagnosis, even though it's tough, right? It's a tough one to handle. Nobody wants to hear that there's something wrong with their child, but I would definitely recommend it.
What's one piece of practical advice you would give someone who's raising a child with FASD?
Hang in there. I'm not very good at respite. I should probably do that. But I think connecting with others who, as Janice mentioned, connecting with others who are going through the same thing, because raising children with special needs can be very isolating. So making connections and getting that support with others who understand what you're going through.
Can you share any resources that you found particularly helpful?
Yep, Surrey Place, as I mentioned. We're also, Hall and Bloorview has been amazing for us. And we're often involved with the adoption community and any adoption organizations that are out there. Because that's another thing, adoptive parenting. If you're an adoptive parent, you really need to connect with other adoptive parents. It's very important. So,
what are common misconceptions that people have about individuals with FASD?
Well, I certainly feel like there's a negative stigma, right? It's kind of like the way I feel when I'm filling out medical forms and I'm not necessarily disclosing that our family is adopted, but then I put that down. People are looking at me like, well, what did you do? Then I have to go back and kind of explain, and it feels like it's kind of, there's just such a negative stigma around it, and these kids didn't have any control over what happened to them, right? So I just feel like it just feels like it's viewed very negatively.
The child's viewed negatively, or the
just the child and the parent? Like, I just feel like there's a lack of understanding and awareness about what it is and why it happened, and yeah.
Thank you for your insights and sharing this information with our community. We're now going to move to Bill and Debbie.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Welcome, Bill and Debbie. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. So Bill and I have been caring for children with FASD and now adults with FASD probably since 1999. We have cared for children with FASD of all ages.
Yeah, and now we're caring for children with FASD who have children, so that's a different realm that we're in as well.
And given the number of children you've seen with this, how is having a diagnosis with these individuals help you better understand them both as children and moving into adulthood and their needs?
I think it's important to understand that the disability is lifelong. So when you understand your child's disability and you have the roadmap, because you now have the diagnosis, you understand maybe one child has a lot of sensory issues, while another child has a lot of issues with impulse control. You have to remember that those disabilities are going to follow them into adulthood. Sometimes they might not be as severe, sometimes they might be able to mask those disabilities, but as they get older and more mature, sometimes you expect them to have grown out of some of those issues, and when push comes to shove and when they're in crisis, they come back in full force. So as a parent, you really have to remember that it is lifelong and that they will need supports in those areas that they needed support in when they were little.
Excellent. Has the diagnosis had an impact on the education of the children you've raised and their supports at school?
You know, it's funny, when we were thinking about this issue, we realized that we have had our children in almost every possible imaginable educational setting, from the regular classroom to a private school to homeschool, and recently we entered into a situation where we're actually unschooling. And now we have a child in school during the COVID situation. The most success, I think, that we have seen in terms of schooling was when one of our children was in the Transitions North program here at Sioux Mountain School. So it was a partnership between the Kuwait and Patricia District School Board and Sick Kids. And it was a classroom designed specifically for children who had FASD. So they were recognizing that the school system a very large school was not working for some of these kids. And so our son went into that program in grade 1. It was a very small classroom with FASD informed teacher, with an FASD informed EA and an FASD informed principal. They also had a children's mental health person attached to the classroom, and he was very successful in that classroom. He went to school in that classroom until about grade 5, and the momentum for the success started to change as administration changed at the school, and they transitioned him out of the classroom, which was when he started to experience a lot of aggression and not coping, and then that's when we had to move to a homeschooling situation. And I just want to see if Bill wants to add anything about the educational piece.
Yeah, I think, you know, some others touched on it, that because they look relatively neurotypical, we call it, that that they should be, you know, with their peers, right? But sometimes they're slower and sometimes they're quicker. The other thing too is that a lot of times the kids will they'll do what's asked of them, but then the next day they won't, and then that's where we get into a big thing. And so, well, they did it yesterday, and it's like, I know, but they forgot how to do that today, and that's okay. That's part of their disability. But it's really hard for the general public to wrap their minds around that specific piece.
Yeah. I think too, sometimes the challenges come when teachers change, or as Janice was saying, every new school year, one of the things that we used to do was do a little one-pager. You know, my name is, and I'm really good at these things, and these things are really, really hard for me. And so just to get ahead of educators getting annoyed with our children because they're doing certain things that they can't help doing, and if we can help educators to sort of wrap their mind around who our child is before they get into the classroom, that sometimes helps. So being in the habit of meeting the teacher before the first day of school, so that you can really help the teachers to understand what they can expect.
That sounds like an excellent piece of advice. Now you've, as you said, you've raised children who are now young adults. How has the diagnosis had impact on their ability to find employment and housing?
Well, we can talk about housing first. One of our children was on a housing list. Sioux Lookout is a very small community, and sometimes a one-bedroom apartment will cost $1,200 a month. It's just not possible to be able to survive in a situation like that, as I'm sure people across the province can attest to. We did have a child that we were caring for who's now an adult who was on a wait list for housing for 5 years. And so we provide housing. We have lots of people who live here all the time, lots of our adult kids. Employment, though, I think the diagnosis has helped them with employment in that as a family, we talk about our disabilities openly. We talk about our strengths, we talk about our weaknesses, we laugh about our sensory issues. We just make FASD our normal. And so our children, I feel, really know themselves. Some of them know that they can't really work with the public in a fast-paced environment. So they'll go behind the scenes and do something that is just a little more regimented. Some of them know that they really need to work in a fast-paced environment, and they need to be driven by that fast pace. And so they choose jobs that really fit for them. I have found that because they know themselves so well, and because we've made that part of what we do as a family, going out and getting employment has been really good for them. They're also not afraid to talk to their employers about their disabilities and about the things that they struggle with and the things that they're great at. So they really have a lot of confidence, and they can really say, I thank you for that opportunity to allow me to go work in a fast-paced environment up at the cache, but sorry, my disability is going to get in the way there and I won't be successful.
One other piece of that too is that earlier on we had set up, like, every parent, you're going to go to school, then you're going to go to college, then you're going to go get a job and that. And what we didn't realize at that time was that that they internalized these things. So some of our kids have been stuck on going back to school over and over again, even though at this point in time their abilities are such that they're not successful. So that's something that we've had to change over the years too, was trying not to set them up for failure based on what we think is normal or neurotypical. So
it sounds very much like the same way the diagnosis in younger kids help the parents, that the individual understanding the diagnosis, it helps them as they're getting older.
Exactly.
Definitely.
The theme in this series is resiliency. Can you give us an example of some challenges and how resiliency has helped?
Well, you know, I just want to talk a little bit about our oldest girl, because she is coming on 30. And back in those days, they really didn't talk a lot about FASD. And we had brought her for a diagnosis because we seen a lot of things that she was going through that really highlighted that she may have FASD, and we couldn't get one for her. And so things broke down with us. She ended up leaving our home and going and living in group care, and she ended up really falling apart. She ended up in a psychiatric unit, and thankfully, by the time that happened, she was 16, they were starting to talk about FASD, and they did an assessment, and she got a diagnosis. And we were able to talk with her about what that meant. We were able to go in therapy together and talk about healing in our family and forgiveness. And she forgave us for treating her in ways that were punitive, that didn't always understand her disability. And she was able to come back home. And now she has 3 children. She parents all of her children. She's an exceptional mother. She's so loving, and you know, she bakes for her kids daily, and she hunts with them, and she does lots of really great activities. And our grandkids are just well-rounded, loved children who've never left her care. And so, you know, I just thank goodness she was able to get that diagnosis when she was 16, and she was able to forgive us for being so punitive when we didn't know she was struggling with a disability. She's very resilient, as are all of our children.
What people don't understand is that both sets struggle. They struggle, and you as a parent struggle lots too.
Thank you for that. What types of supports did your children receive after they had the diagnosis?
So the school supports really changed for our children after they received the diagnosis. We've had some children who came to us with a diagnosis and who've always had a diagnosis through their school careers. But, you know, just the best supports we ever received were special education teachers who did really concrete, meaningful IEPs. So the teachers who sat with us and went through IEPs with us based on our kids' strengths and weaknesses, and picked very limited but concrete things that the classroom teacher would do to support our children. I find that when educational assistants who don't really understand, spec ed folks who don't really understand the importance of being FASD informed and having very minimal things on an IEP that are meaningful, tend to pile the IEP with a lot of things that are going to happen, and the teachers can't really follow something that's complex like that. So really sitting with parents, with children, and doing those IEPs and making sure they're meaningful. The Transitions North classroom, very valuable resource. Our children were very successful there. And the private school that 2 of our children went to, they just let our kids be themselves, and they let them learn at their own pace. And it was small and it was quiet. And that private school did something different than regular schools do. It taught our kids how to care for themselves. So if you're having a bad day, let's make a hot tea. How about we just get a blanket and we go sit in the corner and we read a book? So, you know, And now our kids who went to that private school know how to care for themselves. They know how to care for themselves when they're going to melt down. They know how to take care of themselves educationally. So that has been our most successful. And again, an IPRC sometimes for kids is very helpful, because then that really is a legal designation indicating that your children need that special support. And it means that everybody's sort of legally obligated to provide that.
Thank you. Based on your experience, do you encourage other parents to seek out the diagnosis when they have concerns?
Yeah, so, you know, just the story about our daughter who was really struggling and we didn't know what that was. I do. It changed us as parents. It brought us to a place where one of the biggest things we've learned is to calm down. Take it easy, you know, you don't have to get your kids off to college in 5 minutes. There's lots of time. Make sure that you're spending lots of quality time together, and really pay attention to those sensory issues, pay attention to the anxieties. Before the diagnosis, you know, we were just sort of robots. And the diagnosis really helped us to stop and know our kids really well. And what do you think about diagnosis, Bill?
Oh, I think, like, for myself, you know, don't want to put man and woman, but I had different ideals than Debbie had about parenting. And when they got the diagnosis, then you start learning about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I thought that we were doing this to change them, but what happened was it changed us.
Excellent. What's a piece of practical advice you give someone who's raising a child with FASD?
Well, I just want to tap into a few things that the previous speakers had said. And Janice, you were saying that you give your child lists to go to school, and he still doesn't come home with his shoes, and he still doesn't come home with his homework. And one of the things I did that I found very helpful was one day, I need lists, but I can't remember to hang on to a list. So I make little lists on my hands, on the part of my hand or my wrist that I'm not going to wash. I mean, with COVID now, you were in a different predicament. But my daughter has broken glasses, and I kept asking her to bring her glasses home, and she kept forgetting. So then one day I picked up her hand, I drew a picture of a pair of glasses on her hand, and she brought those glasses home. So that really worked for me. And just in terms of the diagnosis, it really is a roadmap. Don't be afraid of the labels, like Jessica was saying. People are going to label our kids, as Janice was saying, they're going to label them lazy, bad, unmotivated, all those things that, you know, are those negative labels. FASD, yeah, it's a label, it's 4 letters, but it's also the roadmap. So as long as we can use that as an opportunity to try and help people understand that it's a roadmap and take the stigma from the label.
Excellent. You've been in this for a long time, and how would you say the FASD movement has changed over time, and what are the biggest challenges at the moment?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've seen is that when we first got into it, it was parents with kids. Over the last few years, we've been going to conferences where those kids grew up. So.
Oh, he cries a lot. Yeah, we are learning a lot more now about adults with FASD. Mm-hmm. And we're learning that there's a lot more hope than we originally had thought that there was. We're learning ourselves that our kids can be parents, they can go to college, they do have jobs, they can live on their own. And, you know, going to conferences and meeting people like Miles Himmelreich and RJ Formanak and Rainier DeSmit, it's his birthday today, and having them come and talk to us about their journeys really gives us hope.
That's a inspiring note to end on. Thank you. Next up, we have Kate. Can you describe the impact that receiving a diagnosis of FASD has had on your child and your family? Mm-hmm. And how did it help you understand your child's needs better?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, to echo what all the other very wise people have said here, you know, I remember at the time somebody saying to me, oh, there's no real point because there's no funding associated with the FASD. But I would really, really challenge that. You know, for me, just as everybody else has shared, I really felt that it opened so many doors that really felt closed previously. First and foremost, I think it helped me on the path to grieving, which was really crucial, you know, like grieving the life I thought we were going to have, and not in any way that new life that we have is not anywhere near as rich and wonderful and unique as it should be. Just that our path was going to be different. And when I was able to begin that process and meet other people who were doing that same work, that helped me really begin to unpick, so what do I need to do, right? Because life can be really hard for our kids. The outside world might not fully understand them. So what am I going to do to make sure that my house is that haven, that place where we celebrate successes, no matter how small the world might see them, and where we learn together. And I really was able to shift from trying harder to trying differently, which I think helped me better to communicate with school. I found that instead of people just getting frustrated with the children I have, there was a shift there, an understanding, a wanting to know more, and very similar to what Janice shared, I was able to prepare information, and really everybody wants to try. Everybody wants to help. And sometimes just the language lets people know, I don't know too much about that. Let me find out a bit more. So that was really helpful. And I think just also, I don't have my kids' diagnoses on their sleeve for everybody to know, but I also think it helped us connect with people who needed to understand even outside of school, and that was really, really a positive thing. And that reminder at the end of the day that it's my children may not be able to regulate themselves, but I can regulate me. And by my staying regulated, that helps them succeed as well. So for us, it was absolutely a turning point, a really positive turning point for moving forward as a family.
Thank you. What supports have been helpful in supporting your child's needs at school?
You know, it's been an interesting road. You know, we're also several years into this, as our wonderful last presenters explained for themselves as well. And I think first and foremost, just naming it and being able to do some teaching around how that will impact education. I remember a teacher saying to me, I don't understand why your child every single day seems surprised at the first thing I ask the class to do every single day, and everybody else does it, but they come to me and say, what should I do? And we've been doing the same thing all year, and we're, day 110 into school. I don't understand it. And we got our diagnosis quite soon after that. So that was a really good teaching tool to be able to advocate and to be able to really help them understand why it is that that happens, and that it's not the child being difficult in any way, stretch or form. It's that the child needs that added reminder that they don't necessarily hold on to what happened yesterday and translate it to today. And so that was helpful. I go in every single year and do a roundtable discussion with all the teachers that will be providing support for my kids. And that's really, I've had teachers say to me that they felt almost wish they could do that with every parent, because it really let us talk about, I do it a few weeks after school started, usually around the 3rd, 4th week of September. So they've had 2 or 3 weeks to get to know my kids. This year's a little bit different. And they're able to come with examples of things they realize, oh, so that's why that happened. I have just little bits of information about FASD itself, as well as attachment. We are a family built by adoption as well. And, that's really, really helped people see that the status quo may not work in the classroom, and that they will also need to connect with me, connect with support staff at school. And it's really, I felt, made sure that everybody was on the same team. I try and use language that understands that sometimes this will be hard for people as well, and that I'm only there to support them. And by working together, that all of the kids will get the supports that they need as well.
Excellent. Our theme is resiliency, and could you share with us some examples of where you've overcome challenges that your children have had?
You know, I think over the last decade, we have really been through it all. We've been through really, really hard times. We've been through hospitalizations, significant mental health struggles that really were unsafe at the time, huge challenges with education, with accessing therapies and support. And it's about 8 years ago that we really, really were in a very, very hard place. And today our family is unrecognizable compared to the place we were in then. Not only, I think, does that particular child have the support that they need, but finally really is in an environment where everybody understands. And I think the whole thing around resilience is, of course, I think our children actually, you know, like Jessica mentioned, they teach us resilience. They really do. I am amazed at considering what my children have been through. Again, we're also a family built by adoption, with the zest that they start each day with, and how amazing they are at giving people second chances. And so I feel they're a really great teacher of resilience. But also I've had to learn, because at first I found this really hard, that yesterday needs to stay yesterday and today can start anew. I think sometimes, you know, we all go back to the parenting we know, particularly when we're stressed. And I think there's this thing like, you know, there's logic and there's consequences and this is how it's going to be. And actually our kids need something that's different to that. Life will teach them very natural consequences, because not everybody, not every employer, not every classmate, not every teacher, not every neighbor is going to understand FASD. But in our home, that can look quite different. So I've had to really learn in order, I feel like my kids were resilient. It was me that really had to learn that. And in order to do that, I had to leave yesterday and start today anew. And that took time, and that's tricky, you know, depending on the ages of your kids as well. And really letting go of those expectations. I could see my resilience reducing when my expectations became that which really was not fair on my kids. So really checking myself and becoming part of an FASD community and the adoption community, and really learning where to get that support, where people will hold you accountable. What you don't want to hear is, oh my gosh, I don't know how you do it. And that's what I often hear in the kind of more typical community. And what I found I need people who will take me to task and who will say, I know that's really, really hard. You know, remember, FASD does not mean that your child's doing that on purpose. And it's like, that's right. So that really has been crucial. And then building our family's resilience, the importance of play, the importance of, you know, understanding just how much day-to-day life takes out of our kids, and making home that environment where they can thrive and they can get the supports that they need, and they can play, right? You know, I certainly support my children with education, and we try and thread through education in so many different ways in our home. But I also know that at the weekends, the Monday to Friday has taken a lot out of my kids. At the weekends, we need to connect. We need to connect as a family. And that's more important than doing every single therapy out there, than getting every single bit of homework done. And that's the thing that helps them the following week as well.
Excellent. What types of support have you found helpful in setting your child up for success in the future?
You know, it's so important. I think as parents, sometimes we naturally are, you know, at the place that we are at with our kids. With FASD, it will significantly impact the future, what the future looks like. You know, FASD impacts different kids in different ways. We certainly see that in our home, and there's a real need to begin to look at what the future might look like, you know, to think about planning. When I think about a renovation, I don't think about what looks nice for me, even though I wish sometimes I could. I'm thinking about, how do I make our home work when I have a 30-year-old, 35-year-old, 40-year-old who may be at home long term? How do I make sure that they get the support that they need, but also that feeling of independence? And I think, you know, looking to the FASD community, hearing about FASD from adults with FASD, learning from them, understanding we don't have the answers, but they have the firsthand experience, speaking to parents who are 10, 15, 20 years ahead of where you are, and talking to them about lessons learned. Speaking to professionals. We have a wonderful child psychiatrist, and we often, I would say probably we have 2 appointments a month, and I would say at least every 3 months we spend one of those talking about the future. What do we need to plan for? What does that need to look like? And that's really, really important. And then being realistic, I come back to, we know that grief, when we think about losing someone, doesn't, it's not a one-time experience, right? That we have waves of grief and reminders. And I think acknowledging that that's going to happen for you too. I remember the day that my child, who had some significant struggles, had to leave one school setting and go into a different school setting, and then seeing in his old class, a science fair, and feeling that kind of grief around that, and really acknowledging, like, as your child gets older and their milestones look different, they are as worthy as success. Absolutely. But it's also okay if sometimes as a parent you find those things a bit hard. And by doing that, it almost, it's like when you get that need met, then you're able to say, you know what? It's okay, and then move forward. So that's really helped me plan for the future too. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what that will look like, particularly if you think about, maybe not being there one day, and how will you set your child up for support. By acknowledging the hard, then you move forward and really look at, what does my child need to thrive in the future, just like they do today.
Excellent. Can you share some practical advice on how to advocate for your child's needs?
Yeah, I've learned a lot through trial and error. Lots of errors on my part. I think first and foremost, really hold on to and remember that many people do not know what FASD or how it impacts a person. And it's not that they're coming from a place where they don't want to listen to you or they think you're wrong. It's that sometimes people just won't know about it, right? I was not an expert in FASD before it was our lived experience. So not expecting everybody to be an expert and coming at it believing everybody wants the best. Going into conversations with a really open mind, listening, certainly knowing that you know your child best and that you're advocating and that you obviously are connected with community outside that's helping you as well, but really trying to believe that everybody at the table wants the best for your child and that we'll have different experiences and different limitations. I think something I really learned the hard way, but I wish I'd learned it earlier, and now I really, really try, is it's okay to stop something that is not working. We talk about advocating, but we also need to acknowledge that sometimes, because FASD is very much about trying differently and not harder, there will be some things that are not a good fit, whether that's a sports program, whether that's a physician that really that's not their skill set. Know when, we've tried enough and the impact on the child, the amount of resilience they're having to demonstrate in order just to make this work a little bit. It's okay to let go and to try and do it a bit differently. And again, reaching out to that FASD community or adoption community, if you're an adoptive family, they have a wealth of knowledge and can share their experiences of what works. Whether that's a physician they feel is really good to tap into, or a service or support, as we talked about Surrey Place today, the wealth of things that they offer, but also just that listening ear. And that listening ear sometimes gives you that momentum to be able to keep going. I certainly find that. I find that, half an hour or an hour within that community and those communities makes me come away saying, yeah, okay, so tomorrow this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to feeling occasionally like, you're just not quite getting the doors open that you want and need for your child.
Can you share a few resources that you've found helpful?
Absolutely. I feel a decade in, I remember really struggling to find resources. And if you're listening and you're in that position, please know that you are not alone. Sometimes it feels like, everybody has found people. They found therapists, they found this, and I can't find anybody. And, we know that there's significant geographical differences. And I think that's actually one positive thing that has come out of COVID. I have friends in a very rural community with a child with FASD, and they've been able to, for the first time, access speech language pathology. So please know, as I say these, to really understand that it's okay if you're at the beginning of that part of your journey. Everything changed for us when we found a great child psychiatrist who really understood FASD. It was a game changer for us. And so that's really been crucial in terms of the advocacy, in terms of the planning, in terms of pharmacology, being able to best support the child in question with the needs that they have. OT has been so valuable as well, and a psych ed assessment. You know, psych ed assessments can be very challenging to get. I remember being on wait lists and then finally being able to do one ourselves. But it really laid pen to paper. Or I guess it was type, so it's not pen to paper. It shows my age. Where it is my child's trying so exceptionally hard, and the accommodations that they will need and the supports that they will need. And I found, again, that really opened doors and open conversations. We've engaged with Youthdale, which is a phenomenal program, and their crisis team around emergency planning and preparedness and safetyness, transition planning at Surrey Place. And again, you know, I come back to the schools and the teachers. We have found the most phenomenal school for one of my children. It's public school, has a very small number of kids in it, and all kids that go there need to have an IEP. And the teachers start from a place of genuinely believing every single kid there has hundreds of strengths, and the areas that aren't are simply areas that are yet to be developed or will look different and become a strength in a different way. And that has absolutely meant that I feel, you know, a decade later, there's not that fight anymore. We all start from the same place and wanting the same things. And again, as I just caveat all this by saying, if you are feeling really, downtrodden, that you haven't found those doors yet, know that you are not alone. It took us a long time. There was certain services it took me 7 and 8 years to be able to find. And my hope is that everybody is able to find them. And the last thing I would say, sorry about that, is summer camps. That's been a real game changer for us as well, finding summer camps that actually can support my child and successes, right? Just like every other kid, learning how to canoe, but there's a one-to-one to provide that support. Having a schedule that works for you, being able to, campus can be quite loud, and having the accommodation in place that they can go to a different place when it's loud. So my kids' camp does table banging when it's dinner time, but that doesn't work for my child. So my child has the very lovely job of going into the kitchen and getting the cookies and taking them to all the different staff, and thinks that is by far better. And if all these kids who were table banging knew about the cookie job, they wouldn't want to table bang either. So wide array there of things that have helped, but so grateful for them all.
Excellent. Based on your experience, would you encourage parents to seek the diagnosis of FASD? I
really would. And I went into it with so many fears. It was not an expected diagnosis. We'd just gone through several other diagnoses that I felt overwhelmed. And I think at the time, I only knew, not great experiences for people, and it felt scary. It felt like I was welcoming into our life another grief. And I didn't know if we had what it took to go through that. But honestly, it has been nothing but positive. Yeah, there was grief. Yes, the first few days after, I remember not going to work one day and just thinking, I just need a couple of hours to think about this. Like, what is this going to look like? What's life going to be like? But I can honestly say it has validated everything we experience. It has helped me talk to my child's siblings about FASD and to give a name to it, and to help them not think that their sibling is being difficult, but to understand that their sibling's brain works differently. So that helped with a lot of healing in the family. It really helps me communicate with professionals. It helps me separate very quickly when I'm trying to find that new piece, that new fit, whether it was the school that we were looking at, whether it was a therapist. By having the language, it helped me figure out quickly who is going to be able to support this particular path, my particular child with that need. And it's not that other people aren't great, but maybe this is just not the right fit for them. It gave me a common language with other parents, right? Like, suddenly I felt like I wasn't grasping at straws to figure out what is wrong. What am I going to do? Is my child ever going to remember this? What am I saying wrong? And finally, I had a language and other parents who really understood. And that really led me to finding that community. Having somebody that you can text without having to explain because they absolutely understand is crucial. And it has absolutely given me the ability to look forward to each day and to know that we are just like every other family. We have things that are hard and we have things that are easy, and we have a lot of laughter in between. And in a strange way, having the diagnosis meant I didn't have to anymore make everything about FASD. And before the diagnosis, I didn't know what I was making everything about. I just knew that we needed help. And once we had that diagnosis and we'd been through the grieving process and found some professionals and found a community, suddenly, you know, is FASD part of our life? Of course it is. It's part of our daily life. But our life is no longer about FASD. It's just something that is a part of the big puzzle that is our family.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thanks for sharing that with the community. That was wonderful.
Thank you to Dr. Scrow, and thank you to all of our presenters. Sorry, thank you to Dr. Scrow and to all of our, what's a webinar without a few little glitches, right? Again, thank you, Dr. Scrow, for moderating that, and thank you to all of our presenters. I can't say enough how wonderful that was. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences and how you've all shown resiliency in navigating through the lens of life with FASD. Your honesty and openness has really given us a glimpse into your lives, and then we've all come away with such helpful and practical advice from all of you. So thank you. We've gotten some great feedback so far. I'm sure many of you have some questions, and I would like to encourage you to ask some questions in the Q&A box if you'd like. We also wanted to mention that we are going to post in the Q&A section a link to some of the resources that our presenters have shared with us that they wanted to share with you. So first off, we're going to start off with our first question, and it is for Janice. Is your son able to express his emotions or frustrations with you?
Well, expressing emotion is usually anger, throwing things. That's how he's expressing his emotions. He's not very good at regulating. He gets upset with the tiniest thing. So no, he's not very good at it. It's something we work on every day, but it's completely off the charts.
Yes, thank you. This question is for Jessica. How has the school accepted an informal diagnosis of FASD?
Fortunately, the medical professionals involved were able to write letters and explain the situation for the school and to outline why it was informal, which is great. I think it also helps that our daughter was already in a special education program who were managing her other needs as well. So they're kind of open to accepting it. And I'm sure I may have to advocate about that moving forward when she goes to high school next year, but that's okay because I'll have no problem doing that if needed.
Right. Thank you for that. This next question is for any of the parents. The question is, I'm curious if you have shared the diagnosis with your child, and what was that experience like?
Yeah.
You want to answer?
I'll pipe in here. Yes,
Okay.
I did. You know, and I have more than one child, so it was a different process for each child. I was amazed, actually, to speak about resilience, which is kind of why we're all here today. I was really amazed at the level of resilience that they all showed in understanding their story and what that looked like. I would say that for my one of the youth that I support who didn't have a definitive answer, one of the, there was a little bit of disbelief at first, but also in saying she wished she knew. So I think, that really helped guide me with my younger child, wishing you knew, right? Helping to understand. And one of the profound things my kid said was, oh, so I'm not naughty. And that was really awakening for me, why it's so important for their mental health to know, because the messaging, when you're the kid who, at recess, won't line up properly and is, having a consequence because of that, or, when kids in classrooms say things to you is that internal messaging, right? I'm naughty, I don't do as well, I don't listen, there's something about me, and that happens very, very young. Because we then had that conversation and he could remember things in kindergarten that he did. And he said, Mommy, was that FASD? To Janice's point about dysregulation, that's the same thing. Like when we talk about dysregulation, sometimes I'll say, what do you think? And he might say, I'm feeling bad. And so we're talking about, no, you're not bad. You're having a hard time right now. And they'll say, oh, that's right, I have FASD. So, it's that internal working model instead of I'm wrong, I'm bad, I don't do things like other people, I'm not as smart, etc., etc., etc. It's my brain works differently and this doesn't work for me. And I loved the comment about the tea, because we have started doing that in an afternoon as meds, shift and change through the day. We have certain times of the day where life is a bit harder. And so we have begun to look at what can we do, and we'll often talk about FASD might mean you need a bit of a break in the afternoon, and that's okay.
Amazing, thank you. Does anybody else want to answer that question?
I'll take a go at that.
Great, Janice.
So it's interesting. I know it's something that does come up from time to time in the community, and I haven't yet shared that diagnosis with him. And the reason I haven't is not because I don't believe he needs to know, but because there is that level of dismaturity. And there are a lot of things he still doesn't understand. I mean, he's 8 years old, he's going to be 9 soon, but there's a lot of things he doesn't get. So we've recently been talking about his ADHD and how that affects him. And he's beginning to get that now, so for us, it's baby steps, because he doesn't always get it. He doesn't always understand. And I don't think the time is right just yet for him with the FASD.
Right. Okay, this question is for anyone, but may be for Jessica. Given the comments, I wonder how to support biological caregivers of children and youth with FASD. We know you talked about the being at the doctor's office and having to explain it, but does anyone have any recommendations or support for biological caregivers? Anybody want to answer that? We can skip it.
I'll jump in for a minute. Okay, Jessica, you go first.
I was just going to say that I don't have a lot of personal or professional knowledge in this area. However, I feel that birth parents and caregivers deserve the exact same supports that adoptive parents do. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've really liked is that at one of the FASD groups that I belong to, there is birth parents, adoptive parents, birth grandparents, like there's the whole community coming together and learning together. And that is so crucial to me. And that's how it should be. FASD is not just something that impacts adoptive communities. And I actually think the voice of birth parents, birth siblings need to be amplified to really see how everybody is impacted, because there are certain things that are very unique to being a birth parent of a child with FASD. And so that's been crucial. And I think just the sibling piece I want to pick up on here, I've linked my kids in with the Young Carers Association, and that has been phenomenal. They run programming for children from kind of preschool age, kindergarten age, all the way up. It's not unique to FASD. It's the sibling caregivers of any family where there's a sibling or a parent with a disability, but really helping them to be able to name fears, concerns, things that are tricky. You know, I remember once when my daughter was struggling because somebody said to her, you know, first week into grade 5, ugh, what's wrong with your brother? And she said, like, I don't know what to do. Do I tell everybody? Do I not? And those are the types of things you can support your kids, you can encourage them, you can be that safe place. But to know there's other siblings out there also navigating that piece is so crucial for their mental health. So that's been the two things for me, finding an FASD group that welcomes everybody and makes that very clear. This is for everybody impacted by FASD, and ensuring that my kids and siblings have additional supports with people who specialize in supporting kids as carers.
Hi, it's Bill here. Deb would like to say something too.
So, so we currently have a young person that we support who did drink during her pregnancy. And the way that we've always approached FASD with regard to biological family parents is that there is no shame and there is no blame. There is nobody that has gone out there into the world with the intention of hurting their children. Women drink for a multitude of reasons, and I've never heard one of them say, yes, I drank because I wanted to hurt my child. And so we've instilled forgiveness in all of the people that we support right from the very beginning. And we know that when you involve biological mothers in the lives of their children, even if they can't care for them, in that FASD process, it can be healing. And so I just really encourage people, when we first started our journey and we were caring for children that weren't biologically our children, you know, we had this idea that these kids would start over, we would be their parents, and we learned very quickly that we were losing pieces of our children if we didn't have those pieces of their family incorporated into our lives. And so, you know, forgiveness, no shame, no blame, and nobody has intended to hurt a child.
Thank you for sharing that. A question for Bill and Debbie as well. Are the adult children that you support, are they receiving ODSP?
So some of our children receive ODSP. We have a really great process here in the northern area where if children are at all in care, when they're reaching adulthood, they go on a list called the Transitional Age Youth List. And when they're on that list, they're prioritized for things like ODSP, for things like the Developmental Services Ontario. We have one child who was a little bit nervous about proceeding into adulthood with people knowing she had a disability. But as she got older, she realized she needed support. And so she reached out to Bill, and through Surrey Place, they got her assessment completed. And we were able to get ODSP for her. And now we're her trustees, and everything works out really perfectly for her. Some of our kids are not on ODSP. Some of our kids have full-time permanent jobs with benefits and pension plans, and yeah.
A lot of times too, with the ODSP, they want, even if you have an FASD assessment, they want something else, which kind of baffles me. But so you have to do a psychological assessment along with that to prove that there is an intellectual disability. So yeah, fortunately we were able to do that.
Great, thank you. A question for Kate. Do you know of any specialized summer camps for kids with FASD?
Yeah, so I think they might be on the resource list, but there's quite a few in there. So if you open the resource list, I hope you can see them. Camp Kennebec, Camp Kirk, and the one that we have also found great success with is actually through a Y program called Camp Queen Elizabeth that support a lot of adopted families and provide one-to-one supports, but definitely Camp Kennebec and Camp Kirk also, they really specialize in that. So depending, again, you know, FASD, you know, as Debbie just said, around looking at what the future looks like for different youth, it's different, right? For different adults, it's different with FASD, but based on the needs of the kids, we found that those three have been wonderful supports.
Thank you. They're actually not in the resource list. We didn't get any of those resources. So just again, Camp Kirk and Camp Kennebec.
Yes.
Yeah, were good resources that you've used. Okay. Great. Here's a question for anyone. Do you have any advice for a therapist that may be supporting your children, like how they can make you or your child feel heard, how they should approach service, and what is helpful?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of trial and error. As Kate says, sometimes the things you're trying just aren't working. That person just doesn't get your kid, and it is not worth dragging them out of school to go to these appointments, and you're not getting anything out of it. It's hard when you've advocated for a service and have been waiting, you know, oftentimes you're on a waiting list. And so I've learned from now, I don't just take any appointment. I almost interview the person ahead of time. They need to be adoption competent. They need to have an understanding of intellectual disability, of FASD, of ADHD. If they don't understand those roots, I don't have the time. It's not worth our efforts. So I have to really work hard to find the right fit. And I've learned how to pull out when it's just not working. So yeah, it's almost like you have to interview the person ahead of time and make sure you're going to get back what you need.
It's Bill here. I also too, because FASD is what it is, it's relationship. A lot of the stuff that we do is relationship based. So you have to have a relationship with the individual. And sometimes that can take a bit of time because for whatever reason, maybe they've been in care or maybe they've had bad experiences with outside people, because that happens. It's giving the relationship a chance too, because in my experience, you need to have somewhat of a relationship before anybody's going to do any work with you. So that's, you know, a lot of times we go into these things, we're going to have 4 sessions and then that's it and we're done. That doesn't happen with our kids and our young adults. So they need to know that you're on board with them.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Bill. There's 2 things I would say, and timed things don't work for our kids. I understand that there's many limits on funding, and so sometimes we think, oh, we'll offer each family 6 things or 4 things. There's no point, you know, for us, when you add in the trauma piece and how long it can get to be able to connect with someone and how triggering it can be to have something start and stop. So typically, but I also understand, you know, there's funding limitations and some wonderful programs can only provide that. So what I've found is if I'm able to speak to the person and explain why that might not work and ask them to teach me instead and almost do like a consult model, because I'm also very aware, like very early on, you know, my child was diagnosed with a disturbance of attachment is what they called it then. And I began to look at what is our life about to look like with different people coming in and leaving, coming out and leaving, and thought, you know what, actually, that in itself won't work. And I found that many people were open to that, where, you know, when you explained why and that you explained that, you know, they have something really important to offer, but this is the reality for your child. I didn't have a professional say no. I'm not saying that can't happen, because obviously sometimes within a service there may be that kind of boundary, and that's okay. But then I'll ask them, do you know anybody else that can do that? And just really knowing and being confident. And the other thing I would say that I never anticipated before, and thankfully we've only went into it once, and I don't see it as a terrible thing, I just see it as a learning experience, is what does the person or the professional believe about FASD? And believe about what those children deserve. I unfortunately had the experience at a very well-respected organization where the nurse basically said to me she doesn't believe kids with FASD belong in families. That was hard, right? That was hard to hear, and that was not reflective of 99.999999999% of nurses. That's not what they believe. But there was a barrier there for this person. And it could be that she herself, it was triggering for herself for some reason. We're all humans. We all have things that have impacted us in our past. Who knows what that may have been? And that might have been something for her that was just very hard. And that's okay. So it wasn't a judgment from me to her. And I didn't view it as that. I didn't get angry with her. And I said, you know, that sounds very hard. And I said, I wonder if this won't be the right fit for many reasons. Do you know somebody else who may be the right fit and who has had success supporting kids with FASD? And she made the most wonderful referral and wrote the most wonderful referral letter. And, you know, back to what I said earlier about this being a learning thing for everybody, it was an example of that for me. We are all humans, and not every fit will be the right fit, and to be able to move on. So I think as a professional, look at what your biases are. You know, if you have a really difficult time supporting youth with a particular need, go and learn about that need. Speak to parents, go to workshops, join those great Facebook groups that Janice spoke about, find a community, talk to your colleagues, and really we all have biases. We all have prejudices, and we need to look at those and examine those, and don't be afraid to, you know, speak up and to say, I'm struggling with supporting people with this. And I, you know, having known hundreds of nurses, I'm sure there's colleagues out there that can help too.
Thank you so much, Kate. And that wraps up our conversation. We apologize if we couldn't get to your questions. There was a few more that we just weren't able to get to. And that wraps up our 3 webinar series. We hope that you've been able to see some of our other dates. Again, a reminder that everything is recorded and is on our website for you to view as well. We've added a link to the resources that the presenters shared with us today. It's in the Q&A section. Be sure to check out our website at www.surreyplace.ca/FASD-series to watch any of those recordings. You can also follow us on social media at Surrey Place ON. Lastly, we would like to hear from you about today's experience and how you felt, and that we really would like some feedback from you. So thank you again today for all of our presenters today, and for all of our presenters and everyone involved over involved over all 3 of our webinar series. We had a wonderful time doing it. We were so thankful to have everybody join us, and please, together, let's keep the conversation going and build resilience and better the lives of individuals with FASD.